Dark and cold evening to join us here at the Missoula Art Museum for the Jim and Jane Dew Visiting Artist Lecture. I'm Brandon Reinches, the Senior Curator at MAM, and I'm really pleased to introduce Duane. Duane is the fourth artist that we've had that came through and has done a Matrix residency, and we're really grateful for the collaboration, the friendship, and the support of the Matrix Press at the School of Art at the University of Montana. It's been really a very interesting and evolving series of collaborations that have, it's been for about 2 years now that as these have unfolded. And it usually takes place when the weather's bad, on dark nights, and it's through the graciousness of the artists that we're really able to bring such wonderful programming and such wonderful residencies here. If you get an opportunity, I hope you'll visit Duane in the studio up at Matrix Press on the 3rd floor of the School of Art and see the process of making these pieces, because I think you really gain a different appreciation for the artist and for the artwork as you see artwork being made and unfolding in a studio setting. If you're not familiar with Duane's work, you will be in a few minutes, but you can also take an opportunity. As you exit, we have one piece in the permanent collection by Duane that was given to us from Jean Quick-to-See Smith, I think in 2004 as part of a folio, and it shows an immaculate, gorgeous 5-color lithograph called Coyote's Blue Laughter from 2001. So we're really excited about that. When we were thinking about this exhibition, and that's kind of how these residencies came to be, we were conceiving of an exhibition that would look at the history, the legacy of abstraction, and kind of reframe that. And so we started thinking about which artists we wanted to bring, and we started thinking about Sarah Seastream, Molly Murphy Adams, Duane Slick came up, and we've been really excited to invite these artists here so that we can kind of explore something that I think has evolved over time into a really great project. So as the exhibition is going to open in just a few weeks, and you'll be able to see, hopefully the prints that Duane is creating will dry enough for us to frame them and be able to put on the walls, because that sort of turnaround is very unusual. But it's really great that we're able to have them here and producing work for an exhibition, and you'll be able to see how those pieces interact with other works almost immediately. Duane was born in Iowa, and he's worked as the professor of painting and printmaking at the Rhode Island School of Design for a number of years, and got his BFA from the University of Northern Iowa and his MFA from the University of California, Davis. So I'm sure that those details of his biography are going to pop up in his talk, and you'll be able to ask him all sorts of questions and sordid details about his past. So as the Q&A comes at the end of the presentation, I hope you'll prepare your questions and ask them with gusto, because this is an artist talk, a lecture where we're exchanging ideas. So without further ado, I'll mention our sponsorship from MCAT. We're really excited that MCAT films these as part of a media assistance grant, so we're very grateful to MCAT for doing that. Thank you, MCAT. And if everybody could turn off your cell phones, we'll welcome Duane Slick. Thank you. Should do it. Which program are you starting with?
We're starting with how we define our art. This image, by the way, is the Cedar River in Cedar Falls, Iowa. It was actually, whenever I'm back home, I go to that one spot and watch the river. Years ago, I had a dream that I was fishing near that spot and with my brother, and I was pulling in his line, and I had a snag, and I was reeling it in, and the fish pulled me into the water, into that current, and I was swimming around, and got pulled under, and then all of a sudden, this huge turtle, it was bigger than me, came up from underneath me and picked me up and swam me down the river through this creek to a very funny spot. And it let me go into a crowd of my friends that I was hanging out with, because I was living in New York City. And I was surrounded by all my New York friends. And the turtle and I were sitting on shore. And my New York friends were all talking, as New York friends do. And I was like, you guys, look, this turtle. And nobody was listening to me. And I looked at the turtle, and the turtle looked at me and pointed at them. And he said, they know how to get you home. And he got up and he walked into the water and he swam away. So I go back there, think about that turtle. What I wanted to do was to preface this, I was invited by my tribe. They sponsored a symposium on Meskwaki art, and I was the Meskwaki speaker. My father's from the Meskwaki Nation of Iowa, or Sac and Fox. We're actually the Fox. And my mother's from the Ho-Chunk, or the Winnebago Nation of Nebraska. And the Meskwaki sponsored a symposium on art. You know, they covered all the traditional arts, applique, beadwork, carving. And then I was the contemporary speaker, and my niece was also one of the contemporary artists. And they asked me, you know, I had to do 2 presentations. The first one was this one. They just gave me this title and said, you know, I mean, I know that they meant, how do I define my art? So I thought I would just, you know, follow continue it and present it to you, how we define our art. Here we go. And we start here. When I taught at IAIA for 3 years back in the 90s, and we had a guest speaker at our a kind of retreat, and this is what she said. Beatrice Medicine is a Lakota Sioux anthropologist, and she opened her presentation by saying this: there are 3 dilemmas facing the contemporary Native artist. One is holding a tribal identity in the face of a culture driven by individualism. The second one was the dilemma of conflict between market ethics and values and tribal ethics and values. The third is the dilemma of function, or the role of the sacred and the secular in the content of all tribal arts. And so, joining that, I wrote out these 4 points of entry. Because what I want to do is I want to show you the work of 4 other contemporary Native artists, and then I'll go into my own work. So the 4 points of entry were that art calls the viewer to consciousness before holding them to accountability. That art advances tradition. Visual traditions must be viewed as living entities in order to be relevant and viable. They have at their core the ability to adapt and interpret changing conditions, unseen challenges, and identify patterns that often occur in events, be they environmental or man-made. And we are constantly recasting our traditions and allowing them to recenter us. That art honors our culture and lifeways. The artist can serve as a cultural steward, passing information and knowledge through their art and their interactions. And fourth, that art, I think I just went off. Okay, fourth, art and art making is an act and process of asking questions. Years ago, I went to a lecture by Cornel West, and one of the things he was leaving the audience with was, he said, you know, the maxim, you know, he wanted, you know, this is true, he said, the maxim, an unexamined life is said to not be worth living. And then he said, but I would add that an examined life can be painful. And, I agree with him. And so I wanted to start by showing a piece by, this is a very early piece. Some of you may know Rebecca Belmore. And this is sort of like her breakout piece, which I wasn't able to get a kind of a live recording of it, or even a sound, the soundtrack. But in the lectures where Rebecca has talked about it, she plays some of the tapes. And this is what she says. This is called Speaking to Their Mother. And this is made actually in 1991. And she said, this artwork was my response to what is now referred to in Canadian history as the Oka crisis. During the summer of 1990, protests were mounted in support of the Mohawk Nation in their struggle to maintain their territory. The megaphone was taken into many First Nations communities in Canada, reservations, both rural and urban. And she says, I was particularly interested in locating the Aboriginal voice on the land, asking people to address the land directly as an attempt to hear political protest as poetic action. Yeah, my interest in this is, I like this idea of calling to consciousness. In the tape that she played at a lecture that at RISD, I brought her into RISD. The tape was a woman talking into the microphone, pointed out into the landscape, and the woman says that, she goes, listen to me. She says, my voice is trembling. I am so frightened and scared because I know that you are listening. And that's the kind of interaction, I think, that really is about a kind of like, again, like calling to consciousness and giving a community a voice. Some of these were located at sites where there was a lot of clear cutting. This is Wally Dion, and Wally Dion was actually one of my students. He graduated with an MFA from RISD in painting, although all he made was sculpture. And Wally's a cool guy. So Wally works with, this is what he applied with. He was making circuit board pieces. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but that's made completely out of circuit boards. Oops, let me go back to this one. Yeah, this is all completely made out of circuit boards based on different quilt patterns, motifs. And we were in a show up in Montreal, and he had this piece there. And it looked, I told him it looked like the surface of the Death Star. So, I think I'm, okay, this is what Wally says about some of these. A large part of my studio practice has included the use of recycled computer circuit boards. Instantly recognizable, circuit boards are the hieroglyphs of our time. For many people, computer circuitry is as enigmatic as the symbols carved into the side of a 3,000-year-old temple. And yet we have enormous faith in their ability to furnish us with our lifestyles. And of this piece, he says, these are the Thunderbirds. They've existed in the past and continue to exist today. For thousands of years, people have fashioned mythologies in an attempt to understand the power and significance of the Thunderbird. Viewed collectively as fossils or as living prophecy, Thunderbirds are pulled from the tar sands of northern Alberta, hydrofracked from the bedrock of the Marcellus Shale, and resurrected from the uranium mines of northern Saskatchewan to live among human beings, or to live again among human beings. And so that's a detail of the Thunderbird. I worry a little bit about doing this because they use a lot of heavy metals in constructing a computer. So there's an installation shot. And Wally made painting machines, and he made a lot of wooden machines. He was kind of an engineer at the same time as an artist. And I found this online, and he's the man playing the drum. I wish I had found a video. This is Terry Greaves. I don't know if any of you know her. But Terry says, I'm a bead worker. I've been beading since I was 8 years old. I'm compelled to do it. I have no choice. I must express myself and my experience as a 21st century Kiowa, and I do it like all those unknown artists before me through beadwork. And though my medium may be considered craft or traditional, my stories are from the same source as the voice running through the first Kiowa beadworker's needles. It is the voice of my grandmothers. And so I forget what kind of tennis shoes these are called. Converse, okay, all right, yeah. These are, I thought these were her Saturday night Converses. I just like the mix of humor and this kind of genre, it's sort of an art of the everyday. And then, of course, she uses it to kind of honor our veterans. I just like the idea of the deer hide book. And there's the piece in context. And I like this, yeah. It's, everybody has different standards of beauty. This is Richard Ray Whitman. What I was going to show is the Street Chiefs. Some of you have seen these. It's a very famous work. And we'll just jump into it. This is from the late 70s, early 80s. And he actually made these, and he sat on them for years before he released them. And then once he released them, people got upset. And what he had done was he pretty much embedded himself in these communities, and he got to know these men. I forgot, I had the list of the titles, I don't have them. Oops. Whitman says, aesthetics in the Street Chief series were secondary. His main goal was intimacy. He wanted to show the dignity and pain in the eyes of his subjects, which ultimately put a spotlight on some of the most marginalized people in our communities. While others considered Skid Row drunks, while others photographed, quote, Skid Row drunks, Whitman's camera restored these men to humanity and showed them as displaced people. The way of life in which their ancestors thrived had been systematically destroyed over decades. Whitman was criticized even further for Street Chiefs for showing the negative side of Native American life. But in reality, and this is what I agree with this, the series upped the ante for how art can examine social problems. And I know this piece is titled after the man. It's his name. And Whitman says, when I put the work out, I had to stand by it and explain it because a lot of Indian people felt like I was showing the negative part of the culture. They were already overwhelmed with photos of addiction, poverty, and disease, but it was always from the media, from non-Indians. He says he sees the advancements of native art and media as an evolution of visual literacy for the culture. And visual literacy is how people take control of their own image. The idea is that when an image is reconceived in a mindset that is more self-determined, that image is redefined. Again, this is the slideshow I had given back in Iowa. So that picture, it's advancing on its own. It's I only included this. This is me and my juniors in December, obviously. This is when we finished our final critiques. That's why they're all smiling. And the other reason I show this, I wanted to prove to my relatives that, I am a teacher of these. I have students. I am doing that. So there they are in all their glory. This is just sort of a reference shot. Some of the objects. One of the things I do is I work from shadows of objects, shadows of myself, my hands. The coyote mask painting that I'll be showing, that we actually will be printing here, are made from shadows that I cast and I brought with me. Come on. Okay, there you go. This is, I had a residency in Santa Fe at the School of Advanced Research for the Human Experience at the Indian Arts Research Center. And I wanted to trace a shadow of a Katsina doll. And we went to the Zuni tribe to ask if I could get a shadow from some of their dolls. And they said there was only one out of the hundreds that they had. And it was this mouse, Katsina, and he's warrior mouse. And he was considered a secular children's tale. Therefore, he was secular, so it was okay. But even so, they said, "You be careful." Okay. Okay. Just a studio shot. You see that white mask? That's what's making all the coyote shadows, which we will see shortly. I was in New Orleans, and I was taking some studio shots. I just thought, show some of that, just reference shots, just images I collect. This is another image I was kind of interested in. His name's Chief Rain in the Face. He's got a very elaborate history. Just interested in the kind of the stillness of this kind of photography. And so we go to some very early work. This is starting with these white on white paintings. This is acrylic on canvas or linen. And I was using my own shadow, sort of modeling it after the pose from Chief Rain in the Face. And also, just beginning, this was in the 90s, using my shadow. Part of it was I was making a lot of artist books, doing some storytelling, performance work, and I was moving away from that. But I wanted to somehow bring in the presence of the storyteller into the work. So I began to use my own shadow and the shadows of objects. This is from the coyote mask paintings. And when I would do these series of the coyote masks, there would be probably 60 of them. So there's an install shot. This is from a show. I had a gallery in San Francisco for a while. And it was a two-person show. I don't touch sculpture. And just kind of moving along, I'm trying to get to the future or the present. But this is called Red Coyote for Fred Cabote. And yeah, those Cabote drawings are incredible. What's interesting is like the work he's like really well known for. He made when he was 17 years old. When he was commissioned to illustrate coyote stories. Come on. Okay. I can't see this too well. Yeah, that's more of the coyotes. If you come by the studios, we're using a lot of these. The birds, the frogs are definitely in some of the prints that we made today. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to, just give you a sense of what some of the work that has happened. We're now in 2010, and what had happened was my father had passed away. My mother passed away in 2004, and then it was actually 2008 when my father passed away. But he was a veteran, and one of the things I noticed when I was working with material related to things when I'm thinking about my parents, either the Ho-Chunk or the Meskwaki. With the Meskwaki, I always went more photographic. And when I was thinking about my mother, it was always kind of atmospheric. And when my father passed away, he died of lymphoma, and he chose home hospice. And so my family were taking care of him, my nieces, my brothers. And it was pretty tough. I slept next to his bed, his hospice bed, because at night was when he tended to have the most problems. And so one of the things, that became prevalent that, because when you take away things in your mind when you're under that kind of stress, and I kept thinking about night in these funerals because he was a veteran, the flag, and then the mask became sort of the stand-in for the figure. And part of this was like, I was calling it this kind of vortex or this, void. These are just like studio shots, putting it next to things. Well, one of the things that happened one night, my father woke up, he was very shaken, and he had dreamt that he was reading the newspaper. And every time he lifted it up to his face, it vanished from his hands. And then he had money in his hand, change in his hand, and he put it in his pocket. And then just a second later, he would reach in, and it was gone. And it kept happening. And then he woke up, and he was trying to process that. And I couldn't help but think that, he knew that his condition was, his days were seriously numbered. Or at least, his mind knew what was going on. And, it struck me that, those are the two things that, in whatever happens in this afterlife, those are two things he's not going to take with him, is the constant, the daily news, and money has no value there. So, I was just thinking about all of those things, trying to process them through these paintings. And I chose glass as a medium, as a support. Partially, the roundness, because the roundness is unstable. It wants to roll. And the glass, because the glass is like as a ground, it's you get the painting wet, and it's just, that whole thing is just going to peel off. So it's not a very stable ground. And then it's also materials have warmth, like it makes a difference to see that kind of glass, because it gives a piece a kind of a vulnerability. Oops.
back one?
Yeah, I think it's sideways, but just imagine, just through your head. Okay, thanks. All right. So yeah, just the kind of like, and then the coyote, the wolf became sort of bearing the weight of that flag. These are on linen, by the way. Oops. Okay, just to give you an idea, the size of them. And this is the way I wanted them presented, was on these shelves. When I did show them, yeah, the galleries and the museums were very nervous. And we had to figure out, different kinds of shelving techniques so that they wouldn't fall forward. But yeah, it creates a certain kind of nervousness. There was also a glass, they were sandwiched, some of them, to kind of heighten that kind of specimen quality. What had happened, you can't stay in that zone forever. And it took forever to paint those things. And I was longing for the kind of improvisation that can occur with painting. And I began, looking at those stripes from the American flag and started translating it into these, what happened was it literally translated into this kind of stripe geometry. And one of the things I was reading, this book called Straight with the Medicine, and this elder was talking about his eagle feather fan. And this little short passage. He said, look at these feathers, they're beautiful. He said, it's like looking at all the sunsets in the world at the same time. And kind of like the takeaway, I was just kind of thinking about that. What does that mean, to look at all the sunsets in the world at the same time? And so I began to kind of imagine this kind of video roll, or even like the video glitch, or this kind of like something like really just the space just moving. And then I started these kinds of what I call gradations, which sort of reference like, this kind of transition from light to dark, dark to light. I began to play, reintroduce color into the pieces. And they also began to take on the kind of the appearance of blankets. And at the same time, the coyotes came back like this. This is called Osterhaus light. I always admired kind of the light in Osterhaus paintings. This is called Redness is at the Center. I can't remember. Might be called ripple effect, I don't know. Never let a painting go until after you photographed it professionally. Because I released it before I got to document it. One of the things I was thinking about was, with this one, it was, the gradations became these shortened gradations, sort of in these capsules. And it just sort of, it has this kind of gloomy feeling because they seem sort of entombed. I was just kind of thinking about that. And in some ways, it's sort of like, like in the Ho-Chunk tribe, they say the mourning, even Meskwakis, a period of mourning only lasts 4 years. At the end of that 4th year, you have to, if you take it on too long, they don't think that's good. So this was less than 4 years after my father passed away. So there was that still, because you dream about them every night. red threshold. They begin to become more blanket-like. These are a collection of the coyotes.
What's the object on the shelf?
Oops, I can't go back. Well, it's just, a studio setup. It was kind of a mock-up for some of the things happening in the stripe paintings. One of the things is like some of these paintings, they're not subtractive. In a lot of painting, you got that give and take. You paint something, and then you erase it or you scrape it off. But those paintings were so laid out, and I had to kind of figure out a way of laying out, because I think they needed the weight of that kind of intent. So I came up with this way of making some of the shapes so I could position them onto the canvas, and then I would paint them or make them out of paint. This is called Faith Rifle. And then these are some of the blue coyotes. This is called Turning Around on Purpose for Jimmy Durham. This is on the poster, and it's called Soldier Blue. So the coyotes are evolving. They're becoming, in some ways, they're beginning to look out at you. This is called Pensive Light, after Ivan Albright, a Chicago-based painter. He did a portrait of Dorian Gray. I mean, if you see Ivan Albright's paintings, I mean, the light that kind of just bathes across the surface like that. So the install shot to give you an idea, scale. And I can't remember the name of these things.
Duplicating multiplicities.
Okay, all right, thanks. Yeah, the idea, again, it's the gradation. I like this kind of geometry. To see this painting, it's very thick, and it's just graphically, it's just very tight painting. And again, it's nothing was subtracted. Everything had to be just planned, and sometimes it takes over a year to make a painting like this. Okay, here we go. Now we're years ago I got a Joan Mitchell Foundation grant for artists and sculptors, and then after Katrina, what the Joan Mitchell Foundation did was they opened a artist residency in New Orleans, and unfortunately it's only open to past recipients, and then they do bring in some local artists. And so I had a sabbatical, and in my sabbatical proposal, I said I was going to be applying, just to residencies to just kind of broaden my experience of the world, get out of Providence. And I applied to the residency, and got in. I got 8 weeks in New Orleans. And this is in the French Quarter. I just figured that was just a kindred spirit. This is the Joan Mitchell Center. So each one of those things on the top are people's palatial studios. It's a beautiful compound. Oops. Can we go back? Can we go back one? Yeah. And just to give you the whole experience, yes, I would do this again. If you have a chance, you should do it. Crawfish boiled, and it's very spicy, It's kind of tedious, and all the locals, yeah, you don't want to watch them. Yeah, that's what's left. It's I call it the carnage. Come on. Okay. This gentleman's named Daryl Montana. And when I got down there, I was wondering, what's this, Mardi Gras Indian thing? I just wanted to find out what its history is. How are they what is their tie to, Native American culture? What created this? And lo and behold, the Joan Mitchell Center actually gave him a residency as a local. So he was making some of his outfits in those studios. And he's a very generous man. And with me putting a lot of pressure on them, they finally set up an appointment. So he came to see me bringing this to show me. And this is just the breastplate for one of his outfits. And this thing weighed about 70 pounds. And the rest of the outfit is just huge. You probably could find it online if you look for it. Just Google Daryl Montana Mardi Gras Indians. But I wanted to find out what's their history. Who are they? And one of the things that he talked about was, I showed him some videos and photographs from my tribes and their powwows. And then he kind of knew what I was getting at. Like, who are you? What are you doing? He goes, listen, Duane, man, Duane, we're just playing war games here. He goes, the history it goes way back. Years ago, there was always some kind of a Mardi Gras event, but it was segregated. The black population was not allowed to attend. And they wanted to have their own thing. In addition to that, within their cultural backgrounds, they did do things like this. They had dances, and they wanted to revive that because they still had some cultural memory of those traditions before they were brought over here as slaves. They were never allowed to practice that. And so one day somebody figured something out. They said, what if we mask Indian? And they looked at the Plains tribes' outfits, the big headdresses, and they began to dress as Indians. And even though it was rooted in sort of maybe Caribbean and African dances, they were then allowed to do it because they were not doing anything African. They were doing these dances as American Indians. And the other part of that was that when they would escape these plantations, when they were escaped slaves, the slaves knew in that region of Louisiana to go into the bayous and seek out the Huma people, the Huma Choctaw Nation, who lived in the bayous, who knew how to survive in the bayous. And so they would take them in, integrate them into their culture or show them how to survive, and they would hide them. So they wanted to honor the Huma people for what they did for all of these escaped slaves. And so I found both of those things profound. And this is a close-up of Daryl's outfit. If you Google Tooti, Tooti, Tooti's last outfit, they've got a really good video. And Tooti Montana is Daryl Montana's father. And at some point, it was war games. It was gang fighting. And they would actually kill each other. People would kill each other in the streets. And Daryl Montana's father, Tooti Montana, brokered a peace amongst all the Mardi Gras Indians. And he said, let's stop this violence and let's put it into an outfit contest. And, you know, when people see these outfits, you know, you have the highest compliment you can give them is you say pretty. That's pretty. Because when we were carrying that in, people on the street were going, you know, Daryl, it's pretty. And the other thing about this was, for when you do this, when you participate in this Mardi Gras event, they, which I found remarkable, was that they, every year the costume has to be brand new. You cannot reuse parts. You cannot repurpose them for a different outfit. The entire thing has to be brand new. So when the season is over, the first thing they do is they just start for the next year. And it's pretty intense. This is all, you know, him beating. Here we are with the different fellows. Only he can do that laid on the floor like that. And this is an example. It was St. Joseph's Day, and all the Mardi Gras Indians were marching down the streets. Similarly, I showed this to my students this semester. One of them is from Haiti. She recognized this person has roots in Haiti because a lot of the symbols are more national symbols from Haiti. What was interesting was they're looking at a lot of like Edward Curtis photographs, and I recognized the motifs on these kind of plate beadwork pieces. I recognized where they got their, which photographs they had been looking at. One day, Ryan, one of the fellows, invited me on a disaster tour. I was like, okay. And so we drove out to the Gulf, to the ocean, and his friend who researched it, he wasn't a very good, tour guide, because he didn't tell me exactly everything. I've researched everything after I'd gotten back, but yeah, that's a bone I want to pick with him someday. We actually went to the Huma Reservation, what's left of it. And what's happening is, the headline in the news that spring was that New Orleans was losing a football field of land every hour to the ocean, both because of climate change and because of man-made circumstance. And so as we get closer to the ocean, these whole kind of bayou forests were dead. Whole forests of dead trees. And then, this road was just like, that's the ocean coming up along the road. I'm not sure how long that's going to be there. And as we entered the Huma Nation, this is what we see. We're not moving off this island. If some people want to move, they can go, but leave us alone. The people have the right to live where they want, not where people tell them to go and live. They say the island is fading away soon. We will not have an island left. If the island is not good, stay away. Not quite sure what they're trying to say there. But the other thing was that these people, the Huma Nation, have the distinction of being this country's first climate refugees. Because that spring, the Obama administration awarded them a grant to relocate from these lands further further north into Louisiana, into a place that would be safer for them. And obviously some people don't want to leave. We got to the coast, and from this vantage point where I was standing, we counted 18 of these offshore drilling rigs. And I had seen a map later, and what we saw were what you see is above the water, but what you don't see is below the water. And what they have are pipes coming in. And when they drilled and dredged to bring these pipes to deliver the oil to the refineries, all of the ocean water follows it. And so the entire coast further inland, when you have big storms coming in, all the seawater, the salt water is coming in, and it's just wiping out these forests. So that was, that was a environmental disaster tour. Come on. Okay. We zoom back to Iowa, and this is the kind of corn the Meskwaki people grow. And my niece, I got there the day that my niece harvested, and I got to help them prep the corn for the winter. And one of the things that the Meskwaki people are upset about, there they are planted in Iowa and all around them. Because Iowa is all, it's corn and pork. The entire settlement is surrounded by GMO corn. And so with the kind of corn that they're growing, that one yellow kernel means the plant has crossbred with GMO corn.
Wow.
So that's it for that one. I mean, you can eat it, but it's contaminated. It's no longer. There are ways of kind of planting around when they planted their corn, but that's, you would hope you wouldn't have to do that. So let's get back to painting. New Orleans was, I was trying to make some changes, thinking about the kinds of things that I would see. How can the work be in dialogue with my experience there? And then the paintings turned into this kind of, everybody was calling it my Mississippi mud paintings. And I started using the figure again, and the coyote came back. And then I came back to Providence. A friend of mine and I was invited to do a show at it's called the Fruitlands Museum in Harvard, Mass. And it's a very rural, small, private museum. And they have a collection of native art that, they collected in the 1930s. And that's where it stopped. But they also have an incredible shaker collection and a huge collection of 19th century Hudson River School painting. And it's on the site where, who's it? Thoreau, who on Walden Pond, I forgot his name. Yeah. They formed the first commune on that site, and that was part of the history of that site. But what they did, they invited me to do a show, and I was like, I just wanted to go over there and hang a bunch of my work. I can do that easy. And they said, well, how about if you work with our Native American collection? I said, okay. And I thought, I don't want to just go in there and, I want to try it as a collaborative, because a collaborative would, in a collaboration, somehow the subject becomes much more externalized, because you're forced to have to kind of clarify, and you do this kind of back and forth with another person. So I asked a friend of mine if he would be interested in collaborating with me. But the show would have to deal with their Native American collection, because this guy's, he's, he just calls himself a white guy. And so that was fine, yeah. So we chose this object, and this is a King Philip's War Club. and it dates back to 1690. And have any of you heard of King Philip's War? A few of you. King Philip was actually Wampanoag. Wampanoags are in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And King Philip's headquarters, and even the spot where he was killed, is like a half an hour drive from where I live. And so we chose, King Philip. And have any of you heard of Thanksgiving? The Wampanoag and the Pilgrims, that's the first Thanksgiving. Massasoit was the father of Metacom, or King Philip. They believed their relationship with the Europeans was so positive that Massasoit gave his son Metacom an English name, and they called him King Philip. Massasoit died, and his older brother took over, not Metacom. Metacom's older brother took over, and the Pilgrims killed him. And then when they tried to go for Metacom, they fought back. That's kind of how it all started. And there were a lot of details in that in terms of like the relationships between the Pilgrim community, white communities, and the natives. But things began to deteriorate. And it's said in history that the Pilgrims, the Europeans, almost lost. They came that close to losing New England. But it didn't happen. And so this is just a shot, install shot from the show. My collaborator, his name's Martin, and everybody, was telling a group today, his last name is Smick. And so, the joke was, you should brand yourself the collaborative team of Slick and Smick. So it's the club, and Martin's painting is the screen. And one of the ideas was, in a lot of tribes, in my father's tribe, when at a burial, the person's feet are facing the east. So when the sun comes up, part of the idea is the spirit knows where to go, because he goes into the first light. And the Wampanoag is translated to people of the first light. And so the sun was placed on the eastern wall, the club facing it. And the screen painting, I don't know how well you can see it, it's a sculpture that they had put up at the Fruitlands Museum. So it was a very kind of a local kind of thing. That big stack to the ceiling. When I was back in Iowa, I went to the University of Northern Iowa's library and photographed all the books in their Native American section. And, so we could make that tower of books. And what struck me at the time was I didn't realize this until later. All the books are in really nice shape. And we got this book, Outrages Committed by the Indians in Their Wars with the White People. And as I was looking at that, I was thinking, it's the one that was most worn out. And I opened it, and it had been checked out 1,000,000 times. It's like, who placed that book here? It's like Fox News? So King Philip's War. A few shots. We made a book of our different kind of our journey to the different sites. The seat of Metacom is where he held his council meetings. We went up to Plymouth Rock, where they were bringing back a refurbished duplicate copy of the Mayflower, the actual Mayflower. And they hired a group of Wampanoag in one of those living history farms to paddle around the Mayflower in a traditional Wampanoag canoe. And it's a spectacle. And here is Plymouth Rock. It's not much. This was just somebody who came by to see what we were doing. All along, we're looking at this idea of the idea that the transition of Metacom from this kind of cultural leader to suddenly becoming this kind of, I don't know, sort of a casual Americana mascot of some sort. And all around there, there are these kinds of signs, but I don't think anybody knows what it means. This is another install shot. And we made all these sort of text paintings, and then I began to take all of the text and reshuffle it. And began to create something. What interests me is like it's this voice that's just sort of talking in the exhibition. His war is in the water, his war is in the light. I am, I have, this is forever. This is called Oration at Dawn for Metacom. This is one of the text pieces. The people go unspoken. The war goes unspoken. This is an art joke. And this gives you an idea, the contrast between Martin's style and my style. We weren't trying to like make an anonymous thing. It just, he wants to have this kind of liveliness. So, but these are this is not part of the show. These are just some more of the different kind of coyote masks. A voice in the prairie grass. I began to use the shadow foxtail grass. And again, still interested in this geometry. This is a coyote with headphones. I have no title for this one yet. I'm still interested in making more of these kinds of text paintings. This is a little install just to give you an idea of scale. And this is called A Divided Garden. There's more of the foxtail. And that's it. Right? Okay. Questions?
Duane?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about why you use the shadows, what it means for you, and how you arrived there.
The shadows. Well, the shadows started from that transition from artist books and performance to try to bring somehow the presence of the figure into the painting. And it just continued from there. It's just shadows from plants, from myself, from the coyote mask. The other thing was what was interesting is it helped me kind of determine the size of the paintings. Because, the shadow is, it's gotta be, you know, the painting's gotta be that size, because that's the size of the, there's just something about that. You know, it's something setting up certain parameters. And then I guess maybe part of it is kind of playing with that kind of idea of absence and presence of the figure. Yes.
Those images kind of start taking on kind of a feeling of an X-ray.
Yeah.
Where you get that layer of
Mhm.
intuition. I feel that that's part of that story.
Yeah, well, one of the things I was interested in, I was kind of calling it a recovery project. I was using a lot of like sort of folk art objects. And I was thinking about, you know, because when I was at IA, I talked to the kids over there. And I would say, you know, I tell them, you know, the market's fickle. You know, it'll sleep with anybody it wants just to get what it wants, and then it's over. It's like, you know, you got to guard your content. And you know, your information, you have to be a steward of sorts. And the idea of the recovery project was that to take the, I was also using a Kachina doll. It was actually a Navajo wolf dancer. And I had bought them, you know, I buy these things in like these craft fair kinds of places. The Kachina doll I had found at the Pequot powwow. I can't remember who the vendor was. And the coyote mask I bought in a folk art shop in San Miguel, Mexico. But the idea was also, it's like, you know, these things come from somewhere. And they have an origin. And, you know, and this idea about collectability and like commodification, you know, to use the shadow is elusive. You cannot possess the shadow. And by doing the kinds of layering, it began to animate him, the coyote. You know, he was, as you know, when I borrowed Jimmy Durham's title, always turning around on purpose. You know, you try to fixate on the object or the mask, and then what you notice is there's another one staring at you, and then there's another one, and pretty soon you're just kind of in this in-between zone. And it's that idea of being in that in-between zone, where it's like you cannot possess them. And that was part of the idea of the recovery, is that he regains his autonomy and his agency. And so what you're witnessing is, you know, him in his own element. That's why the paintings are monochrome, to kind of separate them from and place them in their own context, which is often divorced from your context. Does that make sense? Yes.
So at times you talk about your subject matter being very personal,
Mhm.
very almost autobiographical. But your technique is very kind of, your hand is removed, it's very tight, precise. I was wondering if you could speak a little more about subject matter versus technique.
Subject matter versus technique.
Like how you blend the way you use the material in your subject matter.
Mm-hmm. Like, are you thinking about some of the stripe paintings as being very?
Yeah, and then also with the kind of like the gradations with your shadows.
Mhm.
Your outlines are very kind of tight.
Mhm.
And then your kind of personal aspects that go in are kind of very emotional. two edges of a sword almost.
Mhm.
I just didn't know if maybe elaborate why, like especially with the stripe paintings, they're so tight,
Mhm.
and how that fits with your subject matter.
Yeah, I think I was showing that green one, and yeah, that was something I was thinking about afterwards. And I'm still thinking about the transition from those paintings on glass to the stripe, you know, because now that you've got years, I'm years away from having made those now. When you have that kind of distance, you look back and you wonder, you were thinking about it, or maybe your thinking was how your thinking is embedded in those things. I don't know if the viewer, without me standing here telling you that, is going to pick up on that. One of the things I guess I would say is that people talk about when they see the paintings in real life versus when they see them, in this situation. There is a huge difference because the grounds themselves, like those white paintings, the grounds themselves they're so translucent, and the light is actually passing into them, and that was part of my idea, was to kind of create this, this kind of moment and then to have the image embedded into the ground, because usually, like when a painter paints a painting, splash, 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 gesso, 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 and then the image kind of exists on top of it. And what I wanted to do was to put it in, make it inseparable from, have it there from the start. And that's something that you see when you look at the actual pieces, because of the physicality of them. I think that's one of the things that people respond to, is the idea that, the physicality, and the dematerialization, but it's still very material. It just bounces between those contradictions. I'm just arguing in my defense. There's. It's one of the things that people talk about. When I've had studio visits with other artists in particular, they just go up there and it's just it's like looking into something. And that's usually when people are looking at the work, they're very quiet. It's not a painting you're gonna, talk about the weather in front of. There's just something about that kind of, something's happening. It's not, because I want that kind of a depth to it. So it has that appearance of the cold, of the, some people just call it the purposefulness, butting up against the personal, and that's something that they see that as kind of a contradiction, but that's one of the things that keeps them standing there. So, but I am sending a couple paintings here, so that'll be in the show in 2 weeks. Yeah. So we'll try that. Okay. Yes.
What does the coyote mean to you, and how does that mean evolved?
And how is what?
Does that mean evolved?
Years ago, back in the 90s, Jean, who's watching, she, and I think Corky was involved, put together the Submolic show in response to the Columbus woes. And wasn't there a Submolic society? Columbus spelled backwards. And organized in-house by Native people, traveled different venues all over. And I was fresh out of grad school. I went to a residency. I got to do it for 2 years in Provincetown. If you go fawcfalk.org, it's a 7-month residency for emerging artists. And they give you a studio, $750 a month, and an apartment, and you're there with 10 writers, and you're part of 10 visual artists. And you're just, you're just making. Falk.org. Okay. Where was I? Submolic. I was there my first year, and I was running out of oil paints. I was incredibly broke. Back then in '90, it was $400 a month. And, what do I know? I was just a kid. So, Jean calls. I was talking to Jean, and she sent me a bunch of books, native poetry, which is liberating. And she's invited me to participate in the Submolic show. And she said they wanted work that was overtly political. And I was like, but I'm kind of an abstract painter. And most of what I considered overtly political was just too kind of one-liner. I want an experience from a work of art. I mean, it's still an experience, right? So I had to try to figure out what an overtly political artwork meant to me. So I decided to make that the focus of my residency. And so, in addition to the Submolic show, there were a lot of people coming at me. You're Native American. The Columbus Quincentennial is coming, the 500th anniversary. Come to our school. Do something. Perform Indian for us. And so I was like, I'm not that kind of person. I just want to go to my studio. So I decided, I needed to figure something out. So I thought, I guess I shouldn't be me anymore. Because he's not going to answer the question. Maybe I'll call Coyote, and I'll see what he says. And so I called him, and he came over. And I let him take over my studio. So, it wasn't me making the work. It was Coyote. So, it was a way of kind of like taking on a kind of personal myth making, allowing kind of like, what would Coyote do? As a way of kind of finding the overtly political. So that was my original relationship with Coyote. So, if I can't do it, can he? Right? So, yeah, that was my relationship with Coyote.
Did you still follow?
We email. Yeah, occasionally. I don't know. As I get older, things change. A friend of mine told me once, as you get older, your symbols change. And I was like, yeah, it's true. Your relationship to things change. Your relationship to your body changes. All kinds of things, whether you want it or not.
Has the Coyote changed a lot for you?
Yeah, I guess, he came when I needed him. And I think it's more in my teaching now with the students. Because, you know, sometimes they, you know, they need someone to sometimes just laugh with them. Yes.
How important is it to you for the viewer to understand your technique and the steps you're taking to make these pieces?
How important is it to understand them for the viewer? You know, one of the things I think artists do, I've seen it happen in so many of my graduate students, you learn how to hide your tracks. We had a painter, he was in Idaho. He did these kind of, maybe it's Colorado, I can't remember. Nevada, wherever the Colorado River goes, they do those tours to the canyons. That was what he was doing before he came to graduate school. And he was kind of nuts. He was raw as a painter. And at the end of the 2 years, you know, I paid him a studio visit. I was, you know, he really dove in. He immersed himself in the studio and the craft, looking at different work, talking to his peers. And he emerged. He was always interested in map making, topography, and different kinds of sites. And what he came out with was a technique of painting. But, you know, I understand how he got there. But I knew it's like, to most viewers, it's like, you know, it's gonna look like it just happened out of nowhere. That it was maybe part of a natural formation. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it's like, I just think as a maker, are you an artist as well? As a maker, that's something to kind of think about. Is like, you know, and I think a lot of artists do it. They hide their tracks in some ways. It looks like it was done like this, but maybe not. And I think, you know, to me, it's like, you know, I'm the product of courses that were, you know, learning traditional printmaking techniques, and then integrating those into painting techniques. And, you know, I used to work as an artist assistant to an artist named David Reed. And, you know, you're just combining all of these things and then encoding them into your work. I don't even know if I'm answering the question, but it's just something to think about as a maker. Because I think, you know, the longer you're in it, the more you begin to realize how, you know, how true that is. Okay.
Let's thank Duane for the talk. And if you'd like to continue